The most common form of skepticism today is atheism. When I say I am an atheist, I say that I am skeptical about the existence of any God. I'm not convinced that any God exists. I cannot justify the belief that a particular God exists. And if I cannot justify such a belief, I don't hold this belief. I am skeptical. This is what being skeptical means. It's simply not accepting as a given a particular claim or belief. Outside of the domain of religion, I can say that I don't know what exactly will happen in the far future. Future is increasingly difficult to predict. The more specific we get and the more into the future we go with our predictions. What will be the sea level in 10,000 years from now? I don't know. If someone will present a number showing a decreased or increased sea level not based on any model, I will have to say, I'm skeptical about it, I suspend my judgment. This is skepticism about what I know or can know. This is epistemological skepticism. I can try to use similar approach to procreation. I can ask questions relating to the life of a future person. What will her life be? Will she be happy? Will she be miserable? How likely it is that she will be lucky? How likely it is that she will be troubled? What can happen to her to make her joyful? What can happen to her to make her miserable? Can I guarantee that she will have a good life? How likely it is that certain terrible things can fall on the new person? Of course, we cannot provide very good answers to these questions. We could try to estimate probabilities of certain events, yes, but we can never know whether this potential future person will be happy or miserable. We can hope for the best, but hope will not do us any good. Therefore, we should admit that we don't know, and because we don't know, the risks of terrible things happening to the future person cannot be waved off. They matter. This was epistemological skepticism. Skepticism towards what we can know when applied to bringing a human being into this world, and more specifically, what we can say about the quality of life she could have. Now let's tackle the harder problem, moral skepticism. While epistemological skepticism asks, can I know this? Or can I justify my belief? Moral skepticism asks, do I have the right to do this? Or can I justify my action? These moral questions trickle down from the epistemological skepticism. However, there we would stop at the level of belief. In the moral domain, there is much more weight as we are dealing with actual actions that have moral consequences. We go from asking, can I believe in this, to can I do this? And because this last question has much greater impact, there are even more reasons to be careful and to take the skeptical position. Let's take someone who is thinking about whether or not to go vegan. He may be uncertain whether going vegan will have any effect whatsoever. He may be unsure whether it even makes sense to apply morality to animals. He has many doubts. But when he takes into account potential moral ramifications of his actions and asks himself, am I justified in eating animals while being so uncertain? Then of course he'll see that because he is uncertain, he cannot justify eating animals. He will be morally skeptical in this sense, and he will take the vegan stance as the safe position given the inability to come up with a good justification for eating animals. Now, back to the human realm. Before, I talked about procreation and the fact that we cannot predict the quality of life of any future person. We cannot guarantee that no terrible calamity will fall on her. So let's apply the same thinking as we did with veganism. The potential parents have to gain sufficient awareness of this uncertainty, and they must realize how significant their decision and their act really is. It's someone's potential entire life and well-being at stake. Given the impossibility to guarantee a good life for their child, and the impossibility to protect the future person from the most horrific and destructive forms of suffering, do they have the right to create life? They can reason that, in fact, they cannot justify gambling with someone else's entire life. So they should stay on the safe side and not bring a child into existence. Having the child would be morally unjustified. In this case too, moral skepticism leads them to choosing a morally right position and action. Of course, we can be uncertain to various degrees about any number of potential actions or decisions. Moral skepticism does not lead to a paralysis of action. Simply put, we use moral skepticism where the consequences are potentially very important, and when we don't find a good justification for such an action, we have no grounds for said action, so we refrain from performing the action.